we have to talk about Ron Paul. I'm sorry. $1 trillion of genocidal austerity cuts in 1 year was the most extreme position. That was sort of the shockwave generator, and all the other Republicans could then advance in the wake of Ron Paul and seem like Ryan to be more reasonable, less extreme, and so forth. So over this past weekend, we had what may well be Ron Paul's last hurrah, and it was at the Sun Dome down there in Florida. Ron Paul's swan song and last hurrah. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Welcome to our second hour here on World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley reporting from Washington, D.C. Now, we're just getting to the point to talk about Ron Paul's farewell, Ron Paul's last hurrah, Ron Paul's swan song with the Sun Dome. Now, the main thing to understand about this is he led these people into the wilderness, and now he's dumping them. He led you into the desert, and now he's saying, ciao, hasta la vista. And that's it. No fighting perspective. What to do? Oh, just keep on keeping on. Platitudes, right? His problem is that his gamble didn't work. The goal of all this was to get little Rand on the national ticket for vice president. That was a bridge too far. The way that it could have worked would have been if Mitt Romney had fallen short. At that point, Mitt Romney would have been able to turn to Ron Paul and say, Ron, get your delegates to vote for me, and I will put little Rand on the ticket. Or at the very least, I'll make him something important. I don't know what. What does he want to be? Secretary of the Treasury? I don't know what. Head of the Federal Reserve? Probably vice president. That's the most plausible. But it didn't work because the other candidates were too weak, and the Ron Paul help worked so well, right? Ron Paul helped Mitt Romney win Michigan. If Romney had lost Michigan, considered one of his home states, he would have been almost fatally weakened. And the effect of the Ron Paul candidacy was to siphon off the votes from Santorum that Santorum would have used to defeat Romney. So, in a certain sense, what Ron Paul did for Romney during the primaries worked excessively well. He helped him in terms of siphoning away the votes, and of course he ran interference for him in all of the debates. So they didn't need Ron Paul and his delegates. Those delegates would have been the kings of the world. They would have been feted in all the hospitality suites. They would have been the apple of Romney's eye. But he didn't need them, so now he casts them out, right? He says, you guys, drop dead, get out of here. And, well, we've seen now how the Ron Paul delegates were mistreated, right? I mean, this is a totalitarian party. Surprise, it's a totalitarian fascistoid party, because when you're organizing the crazed petty bourgeoisie for the purposes of finance capital and Wall Street, you can't have too much of this grassroots stuff. Now, if you think Ted Cruz is the grassroots, the Tea Party from Princeton, yeah, that's extremely plausible. These have all been taken over by the Competitive Enterprise Institute, the Heartland Institute, the Americans for Prosperity, the Koch brothers networks, and so forth. Right? That's what's left of the Tea Party. These are a bunch of political opportunists on the make who have attached the label Tea Party and the funding to themselves. And, of course, they go through a litany of extreme reactionary fascistoid positions. But, that left Ron Paul not needed. So you saw it when they had the roll call of the states. I can remember in 1968, up in upstate New York, with a couple of fellow students, we were listening to the Republican convention of 1968, the roll call between Nelson Rockefeller and Nixon, to see how that would turn out. And Nixon, of course, won. Now, of course, this is all over. But in this case, the totalitarian Republicans don't even count the votes, right? The state delegation would say, Texas, 20 for Ron Paul and 50 for Romney, or whatever it was. And they'd say, Romney, 50, and that was it. You didn't exist. That's a totalitarian party. And these poor Ron Paul people, these poor, duped gulls who sweated blood for this and who believed in it. How could you? I told you not to do this. You were duped. You were used. And now, of course, we even have this rule change. They changed the rules. It's not enough to get 6 states with a petition. Now you got to have 8 states, and they made that change right on the floor. This is essentially the Nuremberg rally. It's got as much relation to law as the Nuremberg rallies back in the 1930s. It's a show, right? It's getting to be more and more like a Nuremberg rally and less like a political party convention on the 19th or early or even mid 20th century model. So I urge you, Ron Paul people, learn this lesson for God's sake. Get out of the Republican Party. Dump that group of reactionary swine. Don't be mixed in with those fascistoid creeps. Get out. Dump them. What more do you need? They've given you an engraved invitation. You are spat upon. You are scorned. You are ridiculed. Get out of there. Get into some kind of an existential crisis and ask yourself, what the hell are you doing? And dump that Austrian ideology, because the reason that you got into this predicament, think of it, in the first election after Mad Dog Bush the Younger and Cheney leave the White House, you're back in the Republican Party. Who did that? Ron Paul, the leprechaun. He used his pixie dust to turn you into Republicans. You should have taken an oath, as I did, when that Bush-Cheney ticket left the White House, never to support a Republican for 5,000 years. And instead, within just a few years, Ron Paul had sucked you in. And remember, that whole exercise was to put little Rand on the ticket. That's horrendous. So now learn the lesson. Get out of the Republican Party. Consider doing what I tell you, which is fight austerity. Don't you be the shock troops of ruling class austerity. Don't you be the squadristi out there for the Simpson Bowles or the Republican Study Group or any of the other competing models of how to flay the American people alive. You want to be populists, defend the people. Defend the economic rights of the people, not deficits, debt, and all this idiotic garbage. Put away Milton Friedman. Toss that stuff into the garbage can. Von Hayek, von Mises, they're all paid by Rockefeller. They're all Rockefeller agents, every one of them paid by Rockefeller, promoted by Rockefeller. Learn something. So that's the Republicans. Now, a couple of more things on Ron Paul's speech. What does he have in there? The Anti-Corn Law League he's got. He says, wasn't it great when the corn laws were repealed? Well, thank goodness we have the American system of political economy. And there we have Friedrich List, the great railroad builder of Central Europe and the great defender of the American system against British free trade. British free trade is the enemy system. It is the hostile system. It was designed to destroy the United States, and by God, it's working. And Ron Paul is the exterminating angel that brings it to you. And also, with this, you get yourself into the same boat with Karl Marx. So the Anti-Corn Law League. On Bretton Woods, he attacks Bretton Woods. He says there are some people who want to go back to Bretton Woods. You're right, Ron. I'm one of them. I want to go back to Bretton Woods, with obviously the changes that historical experience shows. Bretton Woods was simply this. It was the New Deal for the world, and as such, between 1944 and 1971, we had the highest rates of economic growth, employment, rising living standards, the best economic record in world history, before or since. And that's not good enough, because it violates the Austrian school. I want to see the success stories of von Hayek, von Mises, and these other bums, these other stalking horses for fascism. Because remember, that's what they did in Germany. The Bruning economic policies were learned at the London School of Economics, dominated by von Mises and von Hayek and Lionel Robbins. That's what he put into action. That opened the door for Hitlerism. So, yeah, we do want to go back to Bretton Woods. A couple of other things on Ron Paul's farewell speech in a minute. So, Friedrich List, yes. Karl Marx, no. Ron Paul, no. No Austrian school needed. The American system of political economy rules, not the Austrian one. And the American system is, of course, through Friedrich List, basically identical with the 19th century German school, which is the one that the Austrians are fighting most directly. So Ron Paul thinks that British free trade, as expressed by the Cobden and Bright Anti-Corn Law League and Marx, is the great thing, that Bretton Woods was a bad thing, quite the opposite. When they say risk, the biggest risk in the world is currency risk, and half of the derivatives or more are due to currency risk. So if we want to get rid of derivatives, one of the things we can do is remove the risk, re-regulate the international currency markets. And there's even, as a kind of a consolation prize, dulcis in fundum, there's a role for gold in international settlements. But it's not a gold coin standard of this primitive type that they have in mind. Ron Paul supports Assange. He's willing to support that fraud of the intelligence community. And again, he thinks that fascism is exclusively a matter of structure. We started this before. Fascism, the fascist corporate state, is indeed a state-sponsored, government-sponsored, compulsory cartel, but it has to be for a purpose. And the purpose of fascist state-sponsored compulsory cartels is to drive down wages, drive down production, and prop up fake speculative paper, capitalist property titles, as we say. So that's fascism. Now, you can certainly have cooperation. The U.S. defense effort of World War II is government, labor, and the private sector together, where the private sector didn't want to be at that time, but forced to go together because of the war emergency, for the purpose of increasing wages, increasing production, and no reference to property titles or speculative paper of any kind. So the exclusively formalistic definition of fascism is totally unsatisfactory. And above all, what's he trying to get away from? The content of fascism is union busting. The destruction of unions, when you have Mussolini destroying the unions and Hitler destroying the unions, that's the beginning of fascism. And that, of course, is too close for comfort for Ron Paul, because guess what? Ron and Rand both want to destroy all unions with their national right-to-work law, right? They say they're for states' rights, but not when it comes to your state's right to have a union. No, they're complete hypocrites. And the other thing, of course, is killer austerity. Fascism means once you've destroyed the unions, you do that for a reason, so that you can impose killer genocidal austerity, minus 30 to 40% in both the Italian fascist and German Nazi cases. Well, don't look now, but that would also be the effect of the Austrianism on the U.S. economy. So that's all of this. So what we've had is this orgy of Chamber of Commerce rhetoric. It's an ugly face. It's a sickening perspective for the future of this country. All right, and remember, the thing that we want to focus on, I urge people, get busy on Twitter. Mike Leavitt, Leavitt. Mike Leavitt is now the transition boss for Romney. He will be the White House chief of staff, according to insider reports. 3 things about him to start with. In 1998, this guy Leavitt said polygamy is covered by freedom of religion, and he did that to cover up for polygamists. There's a big concentration of polygamists in the southern part of Utah along the Arizona border, right down there. Then the other point is he's got an ancestor in the Mountain Meadows massacre, and they were going to do an anniversary. They were building a monument for the anniversary of the Mountain Meadows massacre. They found unburied human remains at the site after all these years. Under Utah law, that meant forensic studies had to be done. The forensic studies were showing that the vast majority, the quasi-totality of these people had been shot with firearms. The poor Paiute Indians, destitute, impoverished tribe there in Utah in 1857, they didn't have any guns to speak of, 1 or 2 guns for the whole party. the whole camp that was nearby. So it meant that the Mormons had killed women, children, babies with firearms. So once this became obvious, Levitt said, "Oh, this is terrible for the families, the poor families. They need closure." He ordered that all of the remains be buried. The forensics had to stop. The remains had to be buried. He violated state law. He interfered with a criminal investigation for murder in order to cover up for the Mormons in general and also for his ancestor back there. And then, third point, the corruption at the Salt Lake City Winter Olympics 2002. Mike Levitt was implicated heavily in this $1 million of bribes paid out to Third World and other representatives on the International Olympic Committee. And what the dirty work that Mitt Romney did was saving the Olympics. What does it mean he saved the Olympics? He saved Mike Levitt, and he saved the top poobahs and bigwigs of the Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Saints, antinomian as always, right? The people who say that the moral law does not apply because they're the saints, right? It's all been suspended. You have this in Christianity, my God. The Quakers are a good example, the early Quakers, or even later. The Quakers say, I have extra scriptural revelation. The moral law may say thou shalt not kill, but I just got a message from God saying that doesn't apply to me. In Judaism, you have it, right? Sabbatai Zevi. In 1666, he said, look, I'm the new Messiah. I am the Messiah, said he, and therefore the moral law is suspended. So antinomianism, the idea that the moral law, that the rules, the Ten Commandments no longer apply, once you hear that, run. Never trust an antinomian. And I'm afraid the tradition that Mitt Romney says he loves is an antinomian, anti-law tradition, that there is no law. And they did it in action. I can remember at the time of the impeachment of Clinton in 1999, we had Orrin Hatch, who was probably implicated in this stuff himself, right? $1 million of bribes. Orrin Hatch, big defender of polygamy, Mormon senator from Utah. Orrin Hatch came out and he started mouthing off about how corrupt Clinton was. And, of course, the obvious thing was, you, from what pulpit are you speaking there, out there with your Mormon saints? And they were up to their necks in this disgusting bribery exercise. But again, the thing that's, $1 million of bribes, right? This is not going to wrench us out of our chairs. But the hypocrisy, right? The holier-than-thou parade. This is what got you with Orrin Hatch. All right, back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So that's the Republican convention. Now, in addition to Mike Levitt, we want to pay special attention to Mike Levitt. There's obviously a vulnerability of this whole Romney operation. He's got one guy that's got polygamy and Mountain Meadows massacre and corruption and antinomianism written all over him, and that happens to be the key guy of his entire operation. Mike Levitt, former governor of Utah, sixth-generation Mormon, whatever he is, beneficiary of this entire system. Right? And he's widely accused of also having been corrupt. This was a key part of the Bush electoral machine. Remember, the Latter-day Saints of Utah were absolutely critical to getting Bush-Cheney elected through many, many things. Bush made a pilgrimage to meet with the first presidency of the Mormon Church. This was not widely noticed, at least by me at the time. In 2006, Bush went to Salt Lake City, and he was received by the first president and his 2 or 3 counselors. Right? These are old, white types. Bush went to them. Right? So this was sort of his way of saying thank you, because they had played such a key role in his career. Anyway, by the time Levitt was Bush's Secretary of Health and Human Services, he was widely attacked for corruption because he had his own consulting firm and business interest on the outside at the same time that he was there in the government. So all kinds of stuff with Mike Levitt, right? To begin, pull some of these threads. Get busy, people. It's time to do this, because nobody else will do this, by the way. All right. The last time, well, not the last time, but certainly the last time that a Mormon got the nomination was Joseph Smith, and of course he nominated himself. Right, he was the nominee of the Latter-day Saints party. Actually, it's more complicated. In 1843, thereabouts, we have the Mormons creating something called the Council of 50. The Council of 50. And this is the political arm. The Mormon Church has the Quorum of the 12. They have the First Presidency. They have other Freemasonic-style committees. But the Council of 50 is the one that interests us the most, because this is what nominated Joseph Smith for President of the United States in 1854. Here we are. In April of 1844, the Council of 50 is created, and their task is to overthrow this nation. Quote, overthrow this nation. In other words, to destroy the United States. Now, this is before Joseph Smith got killed. The Mormons certainly had been treated badly, obviously outrageous, illegal treatment by the border ruffians, the secessionists and slave drivers of Missouri. But in March, April of 1844, he created the Council of 50, radically different from all of the other governing bodies of the Mormon Church, because it has non-Mormons in it, 2 or 3 non-Mormons, but still, it's not a church organization, but it's above, in certain way. It's the political direction of the entire project. Now, they say that the Council of 50 became extinct when Heber Grant, first president, died. He was the last one who had been member of the Council of 50, but I don't believe that. I think there still is a Council of 50, and Mike Levitt is undoubtedly part of it, and so is Romney, and you want to look for Marriott and Huntsman and these other people as being part of it. So April 11th, 1844, in the midst of democratic America, studied by de Tocqueville and all the rest, the Council of 50 declared Joseph Smith King of the Kingdom of God. So remember, he's the mayor of Nauvoo. He's the head of the city council of Nauvoo. He's the chief judge of Nauvoo. He's the head of the militia. He's actually lieutenant general of the Nauvoo Legion, the Mormon militia. It means that he has a higher rank than anybody in the U.S. Army. Major general was the highest for them at the time. But he gets declared king of the kingdom of God. In the midst of Jacksonian, post-Jacksonian democracy, not so good. Not so good. Let's see. So he wants to be a sacral king, not even a secularized, right? By the time you get, to Louis Philippe, let's say, Louis Philippe of France, 1830 to 1848, wears trousers, doesn't, he downplays the sacral aspect. But the king who's also a priest, or Caesaropapism, where the emperor and the pope are the same person, the Byzantine system. This is what Joseph Smith has in mind. And helpfully enough, we have Parley Parker Pratt, Mitt Romney's great-great-grandfather, the third-ranking top Mormon of the first 30 years of this operation. He says, Parley Pratt, April 1844, the Council of 50 represents, quote, the most exalted council with which our earth is at present dignified. Now that means, you guessed it, one world government, the new world order, one world government, there it is. Now later on, Cleon Skousen of the Mormon FBI faction comes along and starts talking about the New World Order and harassing Carroll Quigley and copying large parts of his work. But really, you don't have to look so far. You don't have to look at Rockefeller for the New World Order. You can get it through Parley Pratt. Joseph Smith declared his candidacy for president in the spring of 1844. One of the Quorum of the 12 is a guy called Lyman White. And he says, Joseph, what are you running for president for? You're already president pro tem of the world. So the Council of 50 is supposed to set up the kingdom of God on earth. And the way that most people have heard of this lately is, what do the Wahhabites say? The Wahhabites of Saudi Arabia, and therefore Al-Qaeda, say no government in the Muslim, Islamic world, Arab world is legitimate because it's not the caliphate. It has to be the caliphate. If it's not the caliphate, no good. That's really the same thing these Mormons are arguing from the Christian point of view. They're saying if it's not the kingdom of God, if it's not the empire of God on earth, Christ on earth, then it's no good, and we'll oppose it. And again, that's a recipe for civil war. Remember my old friend Ali Mazaheri of Iran, died 20 years ago now, but he pointed out the miracles of the Victorian age, Karl Marx, the Bab, the founder of Baha'i, and Joseph Smith. I would add the celestial kingdom of the Taiping in China is very, very similar. In the case of Joseph Smith, he's practically saying he's the descendant of Jesus Christ, he's the replacement, he's the continuation of Christ. He can become a god. He can advance to the level of godhood. And that's really what Hung, the head of the Taiping, said, that he was the younger brother of Jesus Christ, and therefore this started this huge rebellion. In other words, you can get huge civil wars out of these theocracies that all start with this idea that the absolutist claims, the apocalyptic absolute claims of a faith in a sectarian manner, that these have to take precedence over the law and over the peace of society. And therefore, the British obviously promoted them. And we'll talk, we have talked and we'll talk more about how the British church interest in all this is quite obvious. And we've talked about the support coming from Thomas Carlyle, top Victorian man of letters, and John Stuart Mill, both supporting the Mormons, Dickens supporting the Mormons, some others later on not supporting them so much, but at this point they're getting full support. So, the Council of 50 and Joseph Smith for president, 1844. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So let's continue with this. Right now it's 2012, Mitt Romney for president. 1844, in the springtime, it's Joseph Smith, the Mormon prophet, for president, right? One of the most successful charlatans of modern times, in the sense of building something with very little, right? Very resourceful, very cunning, but not good as a model of government. Going to end up in a tremendous conflict and unable to learn from the conflicts that he had along the way. The Council of 50 is supposed to be the preparation for the kingdom of God on earth. As a matter of fact, the Council of 50 is what, under the White Horse prophecy, when the Constitution hangs by a thread, the Council of 50 is going to take over the United States government, and then it's going to conquer the world. And the last struggle will be against Russia. The Council of 50 will take over the United States, ally with the British and Northern Europe, and destroy China and Russia. That's the White Horse prophecy of 1844, in the middle of this. But let's look at this kingdom of God. Now, we talked about Parley Pratt. That's Romney's great-great-grandfather. How about Orson Pratt, his great-great-great-great-uncle, brother of Parley? The Council of 50, he says, quote, "It is the only legal government that can exist in any part of the universe." This is not just one world government, it's one universe government. "All other governments are illegal and unauthorized," writes this Mormon theorist. "God, having made all beings and worlds, has the supreme right to govern them by his own laws and by officers of his own appointment." Oh my God, hold on to your hat. "Any people attempting to govern themselves by laws of their own making and by officers of their own appointment are in direct rebellion against the kingdom of God. For the past 1,000 years, no true and legal government had existed. All the emperors, kings, princes, presidents, lords, nobles, and rulers during that long night of darkness have acted without authority. Not one of them was called or anointed a king or prince by the Almighty." So for the past 1,000 years, no true and legal government has existed, and they've all acted without authority. Not one of them was called or anointed king by the God of heaven. Not one of them received any communication whatsoever from the rightful sovereign, the great king. So there it is. Joseph Smith then demands that Congress, March 1844, he wants, and the Council of 50, called upon the United States Congress to say, Joseph Smith has got to be made an officer of the United States Army, and he's got to be given the power to call up 100,000 volunteers to secure the U.S. border. Now, 100,000 volunteers, the entire United States Army at this point is fewer than 15,000. So 100,000 armed volunteers. And the argument is they're not regulars, they'll cost you less, you don't need to keep them all the time. The House of Representatives rebuffed him May 25th, 1844. They wouldn't consider it. Now, in 1844, what's the situation? It's Henry Clay for the Whigs and James K. Polk for the Democrats. This is a fateful election. That's what they say about the current one. This really was one. Whether today is or not depends on what happens. The Mormons have this tradition of monolithic block voting. They all vote the same. They do what the leader, Joseph Smith, tells them to do. During the 1830s, they're generally interested in particularism, local control, so they support the Democrats. They support Jackson. They support Van Buren. But Joseph Smith went to see Van Buren after the Mormons were driven out of Missouri by the slave owners, the border ruffians. They had to take refuge in Illinois. Joseph Smith went to Van Buren and said, help us. And Van Buren said, I can't help you. I'd lose the state of Missouri forever. No. So at that point, they turn against Van Buren. When they get to Illinois, Stephen Douglas, the guy who opposes Lincoln in those debates, he gets these crazy charters for the Mormons in Nauvoo that they can have their own private army, that they can be autonomous, they can be self-governing. He basically plays into the hands of this theocracy, right? And it's coherent with his squatter sovereignty. So, but now it's Henry Clay. Now, Henry Clay is the embodiment of the American system. He's the one who actually created the term. Henry Clay's program, three things: a national bank to revive the first and second banks of the United States created by Hamilton and others. Without this, economic depression and a slowdown of economic development. Wall Street, the bankers, the Astors, the Girards of Philadelphia, they all run wild if there's no Bank of the United States. There's nothing between you and London. London can attack you anytime if you don't have the Bank of the United States. So recreate it. Secondly, a protective tariff. Industrialize. Thirdly, internal improvements, infrastructure paid for by the federal government if they're of national interest, even if they're only in one state. Who cares where they are? It's the question of what they do for the country. So that would be the Transcontinental Railroad, the canal system, and so forth. So that's Henry Clay. I would say the last chance to avoid the U.S. Civil War breaking out in 1861, the last chance to avoid that is Henry Clay in 1844. You'll remember that Harrison had been elected in 1840, Tippecanoe and Tyler too. Looks like he was killed. He died. Yet Tyler, complete saboteur, complete slavocrat, slave power conspiracy type, and that was the attempt. Daniel Webster made an attempt to create the third Bank of the United States, but Tyler stopped it. And, of course, Tyler was abandoned by his own cabinet. He was an absolute wrecker and saboteur in office. So now you've had a second chance after the Whig Harrison wins in 1840. Now it's the last chance for the Whig Henry Clay of Kentucky, Mr. American System, National Bank, protective tariff, and infrastructure. With that, you could have sped up economic development, industrialized. The specific gravity of the slave power would have diminished, right? They would have been marginalized. Other economic opportunities, you could have started the industrialization of the South, railroads into the South, canals in the South, build up industry, create a counterweight to the slave drivers so that they wouldn't be the only ruling elite in the southern states. It wasn't done. And one of the reasons is Joseph Smith. So it's between Clay and Polk. Now, Joseph Smith comes forward and he says, I'm in favor of having Texas join the Union, but then I want to have slavery abolished with compensation paid to the owners out of the sale of public lands. He's in favor of a Bank of the United States. So you can see what he's doing. He's taking a middle position between Clay and Polk, but ultimately somewhat closer to Clay. So he wants to siphon the votes away from Clay. And above all, he wants to become the decisive swing factor, right, that he can be the kingmaker. He gets this guy Phelps to write a pamphlet, General Smith's Views on the Power and Policy of the Government of the United States. And he wanted to be called General Smith now, General Joseph Smith. This guy was an uneducated, practically illiterate farmer in 1820 to, I guess, up until 1827 when he finally got the gold plates came around 1827-28 or thereabouts. So he wants to siphon votes away from Clay and make sure that somebody else wins. And again, the reason for this, my thesis, which I think is new, I don't see anybody else having it, that this is what British intelligence wanted. This is what the City of London wanted, the British Court of St. James, and the people that run, people like Edward Irving and the various religious groups that reach out to the Mormons. And, of course, by now the Mormons are majority British, right? The Welsh, the Scots, and the English are more than half of their world membership. So it's a British force. Back in a minute.